Well, today I'd like to talk about the whole dating experience and the process of dating and helping perhaps to clarify for the ladies. I'm going to make this conversation more targeted towards women, but the whole purpose is to enable women understand how men generally think. I have said on a number of occasions that young men should avoid being in a committed relationship, getting married, moving in with a woman, starting a family. I have said all of those decisions should be delayed until at least 35. Let me be more specific, perhaps by explaining a number of my tenets, and then I'll connect it to today's session and this conversation. Between 18 and 35, a man has 18 years to get his life on the right foundation. I worked in engineering for many years, building design and construction. And one of the things that I had to learn was how to design and construct different types of buildings. If you were building a relatively low-rise building, the foundation you would put forward would be rather shallow. You would go for what we call a shallow foundation, certainly assuming all things remaining equal in terms of soil type and location, etc. But the lower the building in terms of height, the shallow the foundation. The taller the building, the deeper the foundation. So if you were building a skyscraper, a tall building of say 50 stories or more, it was very important to get the foundation right. You had to focus on using very intelligent design processes to ensure that the foundation was capable of taking all of the load, the life load of the building. And the life load meaning the load that included all of the fixtures, furnishing, equipment, people, and also to take into account the use of each space. Now, your life as a man is a building. I recommend that you delay all of your relational decisions until 35 because I consider your future to be something of a skyscraper, something that is meant to grow into the heavens, to achieve the best version of yourself, and for you to become the best part of what people generally experience. And that means in order for you to build a tall building, you first have to build downwards. The build begins in the basement, going into the ground and putting piles, strong foundations, upon which you can then build the rest of your life. That process takes about 18 years for men. From about 18, we combine your education with your professional development, your professional training, your personal development, and we accrue what we call your human capital. Your human capital is then used to design the ability to earn money or earning power, for which people will compensate you for that gift that you have. You then exchange that earning power or cash for other assets, real estate, properties, land, stocks, bonds, or alternative assets. All of that is done to ensure that you can keep your eyes on the prize, your future, your goal, your dream, your purpose. 18 to 35 is so instrumental that if you make a mistake in that early stage, sometimes it takes twice as long for you to catch up later down the line. Now, the average age of a man in the West today is 85, between 80 and 85. But let's use 85 as the average. This means that all I'm asking you to do is spend that 18-year period on yourself, because you have from 35 to say 85, you have another 50 years to live whatever life you want. But if you make the mistakes early, then you cannot enjoy the future. But if you pay the price today, you can play much later. If you're building a tall building, which I think you should be considering, you have to develop the discipline, the habits of learning what I call delayed gratification, something that is lacking in so many young men. So here are my tenets. Number one, do not get married before you've achieved your goals and your dreams, irrespective of age. But if you start at 18 pursuing that dream, you should have achieved that by 35. Do not get married before age 35. Do not consider marriage until at least age 30. Between age 30 and 35, dedicate that time to you trying to develop, whether that be a business, something entrepreneurial, your purpose. Trying all of the adventures you have in mind, effectively try to fail. By 35, you would have had an opportunity to have developed your 10,000 hours of practice, which would have been between 18 and 30, working for someone, apprenticing under someone, being a disciple, being disciplined, learning under a master. By 30, you would have had some level of competence. You would have attained some mastery in that area of academic discipline. You then have a foundation. Now you can experiment, start a business, branch out, pursue that purpose you have, or whatever calling you believe you have. You have an extra 5 years. So that by 35, you've tried everything within your limits to understand who you are, what you like, what you do not like, places you like to go, what you would have wanted to become. You've had the opportunity to try all of that. And then at that point, at 35, you can start the next journey of your life if you choose to get married. I have said, I see no benefits to a man in the West today being married. In any case, do not get married before 35. Do not have kids out of wedlock before 35. Don't be creating any more bastards that we see in society today. Your sperm is currency. Keep your sperm to yourself. Do not, whether by explicit or implicit errors, bring forth a new life into the world until you've achieved your dreams, until you have the foundation to support that child. Do not move in with a woman until 35. And do not consider that until 30. Do not be in a dedicated relationship until at least 35. The reason being that relationships are dream killers. All of those dreams you have, you will sacrifice those dreams when the relationship comes. For some reason, you'll be thrust into responsibility and manhood too young. And if you can, once you have got to the point where you're ready to be married, should you start a relationship, should you get married, wait for at least another 3 years before you have a child. The reason being to give you the time to see if you really want to bring forth life with that person. And those are my tenets. And let's park that aside, because I think this is where today's session begins. I have tried to say previously that one of the ways to understand relationships is to recognize that there is an analogy that can be used as a way of understanding relationships, why they work, why they fail, why sometimes they confound us. Sometimes we don't understand why things are the way they are. Let's assume that we have someone who's followed all of my tenets. This would mean at the point when he's trying to choose a spouse, in this case, he wants to be married because he wants to have children. One of the reasons that I suggest that could be something that could override the selfish reason of not getting married. Because except you're trying to bring forth life into the world, there is no benefit to marriage, to a man. But if you want children, there is a benefit to the children for the parents to be in a union. Let's say we have someone who's 35. Now this is where I start to perhaps speak to the ladies. One of the mistakes women make is not recognize that there is a window of opportunity that they have, very similar to the men. Unfortunately, theirs comes with a time clock. Beauty fades. Usually, all things remaining equal, a woman has about 12 years to maximize her beauty. A woman's value, I hate to say this, but this is true. A woman's value to a man is not based on her degree. It's not based on how intelligent she might be. It's not based on what she earns, how much wealth she has. A woman's value in the marketplace amongst men is based on her attractiveness. And that attractiveness is not something that is only subjective, it's objective. It can be measured. It's visually measurable. Men simply look to beauty, youth, as the most important motivation for what we do. Primarily when we date specifically with the end in mind of sex. We are attracted to you based on your physical attributes. So we choose you not based on the fact that you might become a good mother, not because you're going to be a good spouse. We choose you because firstly we want to see you naked. We want to have sex with you. Beyond the sex, there could be other decisions that we take into account, such as your reproductive fertility value and your non-sexual values, such as whether you're feminine, whether you have the traditional gender roles as a foundation to your upbringing, whether you have those traditional skills that women once had. We look at your attitude and your mannerisms and your etiquette and your decorum and how you carry yourself. But all of that comes after we've actually seen you naked, after we've had sex with you. Before that, all we think about is your attractiveness, beauty. Beauty has different derivatives. It could be the color of your skin in terms of how radiant it is. I'm not referring to melanin content, I'm referring to radiance and plumpness, and it could be to do with how thin you are. Generally, men, irrespective of race, irrespective of age, want to be with the most attractive women, the most attractive young women, the most attractive young, fit, thin women, beautiful women that they can get. In other words, if you were to put a scaling factor to what we want to bank people who are rated as 9 and 10s in beauty, if we can afford it. Now this is where my tenants start to come in. And I'm going to use the analogy of cars, because relationships and dating can be understood from understanding how men interact with cars. Generally, most men, not all men, most men, and when I say most, I'm just going to use men rather than to keep qualified men, generally drive the cars that they can afford. I know today we have the credit facility available that people can have cars that they hire or have on lease. But if you go back to the day when people had to pay for cars, people drove the cars, men drove the cars that they could afford to buy. So, for example, if you could not afford to buy a Ferrari and buy 2 or 3 times over, you did not buy one. Those who drive Ferraris generally can afford to have Ferraris. They can afford to have that car wrecked and buy another one. In other words, they can afford that car. The rest of the population, unfortunately, cannot afford Ferraris. So we drive Toyotas. Some of us drive Hondas, BMWs, all of which are reliable cars. But they are not Ferraris. A Ferrari will be considered a 10 in terms of scale, a 9 or a 10 depending on the age of the Ferrari, but generally a 9 or a 10. A BMW 3 Series will be considered perhaps a 7. A Toyota might be considered perhaps a 6. The BMW and the Toyota are reliable cars. They can take you from A to B. They can do so safely. They can do so within record time, as fast as possible. But they do not give you the excitement, the acceleration that a Ferrari gives you. They're two different cars. Men generally have cars and drive cars that they can afford. Now let's bring that back and extrapolate that to relationships. Men, generally, as a result of the resources they have, are with women that they can afford. So, and similarly, the woman, remember, all we're doing here is comparing what we bring to the table. A man brings his resources to the table. A woman is generally with the caliber and kind of man that she's able to attract using her beauty, using her youth. The man also is with the type and caliber of woman that he can keep and attract using his resources. So, one of the reasons I recommend to men to delay the process of being in a relationship is simply because the younger you are, the less you have what women want, which is resources. The older you get, the more you have of what women want, which is resources. Similarly, women, the younger you are, the more you have what we want, which is beauty, youth. The older you get, the less you have what we want, beauty and youth. So both parties are playing a game where the woman has roughly 12 years before her beauty starts to fade, between 18 and 30. From 30, the steepness and the loss of her beauty and her attractiveness in the marketplace is quite significant. And therefore, the woman has to ensure that she maximizes what will be the potential that I consider to be her beauty, that 12-year period. Maximize that potential. The man, on the other hand, it's always in your best interest to delay that decision-making process because you have nothing to exchange. And if you're exchanging, you have a balance of power that is not equal. A woman who is, say, 25, at the peak of her beauty, at the peak of her attraction, has higher leverage than a man who is, say, 25, because all he has is potential. He's created nothing, and he knows nothing, and he has nothing. The man should delay his decision until 35, when he started to create wealth and create opportunities and build a network of people who he can rely on, so he has something to bring to the table. Now, what that simply means is that women, one of the decisions you have to get right is what I call age gap dating. A lot of ladies make the foolish decision of marrying people within their age range. She's 26 and she wants to marry someone who's 27. That's just wrong. She's 27 and she wants to marry someone who's 25 or 26 or 27 or 28. That's wrong. And here's part of the reason it's very wrong. Not only is he unable to have the wisdom, the resources, the experience, the ability to lead you, to provide and protect, profess his love for you. Unfortunately, recognizing that as you age, you have less of what men find attractive, but as he ages, he has more of what women find attractive. You, the woman, will be faced with the challenge of keeping him away from all the other distractions that come his way when he actually starts to make a lot of money. So you want to maintain an age gap that is sufficient so that, here is the key thing, I bring it back to cars, so that he still considers you to be that Ferrari when he acquires the opportunity to bring himself into that relationship. Put it more simply, a man who's 35, who gets married to a woman who is, say, 7 years his junior, and let's say she's 27, going on 28, there's an age gap that exists. But also he's meeting the woman when she's still very young, so he has a lot of memories of what she looked like when she was young. Let's fast forward. When he's 50, she will be 43. She will still be attractive in his eyes. She will still be that Ferrari that he bought. That was always the most important thing in his life. On the other hand, if a woman delays until 35, 36, or 37, and she gets married to a man who is, say, 40, there's a 3-year gap between both parties. But unfortunately, he met you when you were old. You were that second-hand, used, sometimes salvaged vehicle, especially if you've had children. So the memory he has in his mind is that he bought a car that was used, a second-hand car. This simply means that when the opportunity comes for him to test drive a brand new Ferrari on a track or to acquire one, remember, men are logical thinking machines. The fact that we can afford a Ferrari does not mean we want to drive a Ferrari. What we want is to retain the freedom of test driving a Ferrari or using a Ferrari when we want. So for example, if I own a Ferrari, I have to be careful about where I drive the car to, where I park the car, all of the maintenance, all of the repairs. It comes with some responsibility. I might be a simple guy who decides, no, I don't want that responsibility. I just want to be able to hire a Ferrari if I have an occasion to go to. I want to use the Ferrari once a month, twice a month. I'll pay for it. At the end of the day, I return it back to the dealer. I'm free. But for that 2 days or 3 days or 1 week, I want to feel like a young boy again. So a man who is in his 40s can afford a Ferrari now. He can afford a younger, better looking woman who is attractive, who is hot, who is thin, who is beautiful, who is at the peak of her beauty, 25. You at 42, 43 cannot compete with your younger self, which means you will always lose, especially if he cannot control his desire to test drive that car. Hence, one of the reasons I recommend to young men to delay the decision-making process is to give them the upper hand in recognizing that they don't have to be on the losing side of the negotiation in a relationship. Just wait. Because between 18 and 35, if you focus on your dreams, at 35, you recognize that you can afford anything you want. But interestingly, between 18 and 35, you can still have whatever your needs are, you can have those met without the obligation and the responsibility of maintaining the car. The woman, on the other hand, has to make a decision early, which, in my opinion, It's a hard decision to make, which is why I usually recommend to women not to get married before age 25, 27. Not to get married until they've achieved their dreams. Not to have any kids until they've achieved their dreams. Not to be in a mono relationship until they've achieved their dreams. Not to move in with a man until they've reached at least 27 and achieved their dreams. Similar to the male expectations, the woman needs to pursue her goals, her dreams, primarily because most people do not have the opportunity to have great careers. The reason being, most of us throw our dreams and goals away too early. If the woman focuses on her dreams, she has the opportunity not just to have a job, but to have a career, which then means at 27, she's achieved her dreams. She can then come to the conversation and provide something other than beauty and attraction to the man. This might be, I want to raise your children. I want to do so in a way that will make you proud. In addition to that, I have this understanding about gender roles, and unlike that Ferrari you're thinking about getting, who has no clue about how to satisfy an older man, who has no clue about how to be a muse, who has no clue about how to stay faithful and loyal to you, who has no clue about her potential and is happy to waste it. I, on the other hand, I'm still young. I'm 27, 28. I'm still pretty. I understand how to get along with the man. I have achieved my dreams, so I'm not relying on you alone for you to look after me. So I'm coming to the relationship in good faith, but I'm bringing so many other things along with me, apart from my beauty. That has a much more higher likelihood of winning the man's affection and loyalty, to the point where he says, perhaps you're a 2001 Ferrari. I bought you as a 2001 Ferrari, and 10 years down the line, there's a new Ferrari that has come out. I would love that Ferrari, but I have built up so much emotional investment in this car that I have. It's become a vintage car, and I will not trade this car for the new Ferrari, although I might get more excitement driving the new Ferrari. By doing this, or rather by the woman coming to the conversation with something other than beauty, because that fades, she builds a level of loyalty in the man, in his heart, whereby he decides, I'm happy with what I have. I have the option to go and test drive an Aston Martin or Ferrari every other weekend, but I'd rather not. It's too much hassle, too much drama. That is one of the reasons why I recommend to men to delay their decisions until they have achieved their dreams. Because once they have achieved their dream, it's outstanding. It would outstand most men when they come to the realization that they can have whatever they want relationally, because now they can afford whatever is on the menu. Very important decision to keep in mind. Unfortunately, if you go against the decision and say you get married at 22, my experience has been, at 22, you get married to a girl who is 22, same age, for example. She would have been seen and courted by men who were 28, 29, 30, 35, 36 and above. They have more resources. Therefore, the likelihood of you actually getting someone who is a 9 or a 10 at 22 is very low. What tends to happen is most men in that age bracket get married to people who are 6 or 7 or 8. Effectively, they settle for something less, but they're still very proud that someone who is an 8 or a 7 even chose them, because someone who is a 7 or an 8, in terms of the balance of power, still outranks the 22-year-old young man, because he has nothing. No resources, no potential, no influence, no connections. Unfortunately, what tends to happen, those men are treated very poorly in the relationship because of the balance of power dynamics. Sex is used as a weapon. The woman changes everything that she wants brought to the table at the early stage. The man is in a prison, to put it in a very, very blunt way, until he gets to 30, 35, and then suddenly he awakens into the fact that he actually is desired in the marketplace. But here's the key thing. At 35, the woman that you've got married to at 22, you look at the woman and you look at across the marketplace, you come to the realization that you made a wrong decision. Not because she was simply the wrong person to get married to, but because you made the decision when your funds were not available. In other words, you settled for what perhaps, knowing what you know in the future, having the resources you have in the future, you could have made a different decision. Now, we don't always make that decision, but in more cases than none, what you find is that the younger you are when you get married, the higher the likelihood of divorce for many reasons: finances, wisdom, education, both of you not having achieved any of your dreams, frustration, just the life challenges. The older you are, the higher the likelihood that the relationship will last, because in many ways you've had the opportunity to, sow your wild oats, got whatever the sexual desires you have, you've got it out of your system. You've tried things, you've failed, and you've realized that failing is a natural process of life. I think for most people who are 22, the first time they come against an issue in the relationship and this misunderstanding, we take the path of least resistance. We think divorce is the way out. No. The two people were the problem, not necessarily the institution, although the institution in modern time is a bit of a problem, but genuinely, if you mix a rotten egg with a good egg, you get bad omelets. So it's the egg that is the issue, not the pan, per se. But the longer you delay, the more you have the opportunity as a man to fail, to try things, to come to understand your weaknesses, your failures, your failings. And the more you come to accept that every day is a day to improve, and that you may break promises, but it's what you do, having broken the promise, that really matters. Can you come back and try to make ends meet? And can you look for a solution? For some strange reason, that comes with maturity. Now, keep in mind, and this is where I close, ladies, you have a 12-year window to get the most important decisions in relation to your future and how you want to lead that life, whether you want to be single, whether you want to be in a family. 12 years to make those decisions and make it right. But keep in mind that the younger you are, the more you have what we want, we mean men, which is beauty and youth and sex. The older you get, the less desirable you are to a man, because you have less of what we want. We, on the other hand, men, the younger we are, the less desirable we are, generally from the perspective of resources. The older we get, the more resources we have the ability to acquire, and therefore the more range of women we can attract across all age groups that we can attract to us. So keep those two things in mind. Recognize that for men, women are like cars. You drive the car that you can afford. And likewise, the woman gets to have the type of man that she can attract using her beauty, her youth, and her attractiveness. How we play that game is really the mystery of life, because the game is never played well, and there is no formula that works. Sometimes we learn, sometimes we fail, and sometimes we just look at life and say, oh well. But keep that in mind. If 1 in 2 marriages or relationships will end in a dissolution, it simply means you know the odds, and therefore you know perhaps the decisions that have to be made and the calculations you have to take into account before you make that decision. And I hope today's session has perhaps been useful in enabling you to think maybe in a different way about relationships and why it's so important for the man to hesitate, to wait, to be patient, to recognize that a lot of the ways we make decisions with regards to relationship were things we've inherited from our parents and our forefathers. Life expectancy before the 1940s was 42. So people got married at 25, and technically they had 20 years at most to live. So it was fine to get married at 25 because who knows, in 10 years' time you would have been dead. Today, there is no rush to get married at 25 if you're a man, because you're going to live till 85. Wait until 35 before making that decision, because you still have 50 years ahead of you. But at that point when you made the decision, 35, at least you have one of the most important requirements that a man needs, which is the ability to provide for the family. And most importantly, the ability to provide for himself. I hope that's been useful.